Hi, welcome to Actualol. I'm Jon Purkis. These are the board games I've been playing lately. Where you set it too low and they got a really good thing for really cheap, Tetris-shaped roll and write game. There's this interesting gambling aspect to it. Great with kids or anyone that would get frustrated about not doing so well. Roll and write game from Days of Wonder from Reiner Knizia, and I've really been enjoying a lot of his older games lately. That card reveal, it's always a big moment. Second Chance is a Tetris-shaped roll and write game from designer Uwe Rosenberg. All of those things sound interesting to me, although it does feel like there are a lot of roll and write games, a lot of Tetris games. This one is very simple in the way it works. You start off, you each have a slight asymmetric start because you're given a shape that nobody else has that you have to draw in the center of your pad. From then on, there's just going to be two cards available with two different shapes, and you pick one and you draw it on your sheet. So I could go for this small dot, or I could go for the long one, and you draw one of those, then another two are revealed. These ones are much trickier shapes. They're going to take up a lot more space. You're not really racing to complete your sheet. You're just trying to make sure that you will be able to finish it in the most complete way possible. And it has all of that frustration and decision making that you get with other Tetris games, because you'll get shapes and you're not sure which one to go for or where to put it, how to rotate it or flip it. It's got all of that you want, but in such a small and quick package that you're just straight into those decisions. And I've enjoyed every game of Second Chance. It's funny, I thought I wouldn't be into it. I thought it would kind of be a bit derivative. And obviously it is, but in a positive way. It's taking those ideas and again distilling them down to such a core idea. The rules are so simple that you could play it with anyone. I really would recommend this to almost anyone that likes roll and write games, that likes Tetris games, that wants a small travel-sized box, and maybe wants a game that they could play with kids or play with parents that aren't gamers, because it just kind of works. You're trying to complete it in the best way possible, but the shapes only appear in the deck a certain number of times, and conveniently they've given you these reference cards to show you which shapes are in the deck and how many of them occur, and that can really help you. You can use that to sort of plan ahead and think, well, if I leave a gap that sized and I've already seen a long piece that is 4 squares long, well, then it's not going to turn up again, so maybe I need to think about doing something differently. The reason the game's called Second Chance, if you can't draw a shape because maybe these two shapes are really big and complicated and you're towards the end of the game and your pad is filled up, then you have 1 second chance to stay in the game. You don't lose the game if you get eliminated, but generally speaking, yeah, you want to fill up as many spaces as possible. And so you're hoping for this second chance will be the perfect card to fill in the space that you have. So in this instance, it's a really big piece, so the chance of it fitting in is impossible, but maybe it's one of those singular squares that can fit almost anywhere that you've got a space. And so there's a kind of push your luck vibe to it. And that card reveal, it's always a big moment because everyone's watching and seeing if you will get the card you want. Maybe 2 people will need their second chance on the same turn. You'll take it in turns. I'll get my card. I didn't get it, but the other person gets their card and maybe they get a shape that does work for them and they get to stay in the game a round longer. So like I said, it's not about staying in the longest, it's just about filling up your sheet the best. And in fact, if you do get to the end of the game, everyone generally is going to have 1 or 2 spaces. The person, if there's a tie, it's the person who went out first. So there is some benefit to kind of rushing it a little bit. And the reason you would get awarded that is because you have taken the bigger shapes. If you're finishing before someone else, that means you're taking the riskier, bigger shapes. And that's another thing of the game as well, is that you can just always take the easy pieces, not fill up much of your sheet because you're just taking it slow. You know that you want to do things very carefully and fit it all in nicely. But the game ends when the deck runs out, and so you might sort of take too many small pieces and actually just not fill up enough gaps. I have found that everyone generally gets pretty close. This is one of the sheets that I did, and this just has 1 space in it. But in that game, another person completed their sheet, and I was sort of amazed to see that happen, but it is possible. And I like that you can play a Tetris game that you can actually have a sort of perfect finish. There's there's some luck to it, but there's also this planning strategy because of the cards that are here. I had an absolute blast with Second Chance, and everyone I played it with, it's like 10 or 15 minutes. You're just like any great roll and write game, you're all playing at the same time. You're all having fun. You're getting frustrated by the cards that are available. And then that extra little flip of the Second Chance that you get just sort of makes it that bit more interesting. It reminds me of Quinto when you're desperately hoping for a reroll that will give you the number you need. So yeah, I would highly recommend Second Chance. This gets a seal of actual love. I was amazed that Uwe Rosenberg could keep innovating on Tetris games and now doing it with a roll and write. If you want a travel game, it's got a nice look to it too, then definitely check out Second Chance. Isle of Skye is a very popular game from a few years ago that I'd never played, so I wanted to just try it out. I'd heard many good things, and I was never really sure from what I'd heard whether it was the kind of game for me. This is from designer Alexander Pfister, who makes a lot of big, heavy Euro games that wouldn't be my kind of style, and from Andreas Pelikan, and they both did Broom Service together, which is a game that I actually do really love. What I got is a bidding game where you are trying to build a Scottish region. You're on the Isle of Skye, and you're trying to get points in various different ways. So you've got a castle that is the starting of your territory, and then through the rounds you'll be buying tiles to add to your territory so that you can complete objectives and just generally get points. So the way it works is that there are 4 different objectives in each game, and these change with each game, which immediately makes it interesting because every game is going to be completely different, the things that you're aiming for. And every round you'll be scoring different sets of these objectives. So at the end of the first round, you'll only be worrying about objective A, then it's B, then it's A and C. And so every objective will score 3 times in the game, but it's the timing of that as to what you need to worry about. Every round is very, very simple. Everyone draws 3 tiles out of the bag and puts them in front of their shield here. And these are the tiles that are available for me to set the price of and maybe for other people to buy. So I'm looking at these tiles and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I would like this one because it's got a lighthouse and I know this objective B needs lighthouses. So I can set the price on that. And then when everyone has set their prices, we all reveal, and these are the prices of the tiles that are available. This axe, you have to always get rid of a tile. So this axe means that the tile's back in the bag, it's gone. Nobody can get that one. You then take it in turns for the opportunity to buy a tile from one other person, and you would have to pay the price that they've set. So if somebody wants this lighthouse tile, they would have to pay me 5, because that's what I've put here, but I would get my 5 money back. If it goes around and nobody buys my tiles, then I pay this price to the bank and I keep the tiles for myself and then I add them to my territory. So you're trying to set prices where maybe you want to set it high because you think somebody else will want to buy it from you at that price and you want the cash, or maybe you are just trying to pay a lot for it because you're worried that someone else will buy it first. You can't decide. If someone wants to pay your price, there's nothing you can do about that. So you need to set a very high price, either that they can't afford or that they're just so sort of scared off by that they don't bother paying for it. And so then you would get the tile and you have to place it in your region. And if you've ever played Carcassonne or games like that, there are simple rules about how you have to create your territory. The artwork on the tiles have to match, so a lake continues into another lake. You've got roads that connect up and mountain regions and grass regions. And all of that mostly is to do with these objectives. So in this game, you would want completed regions. So a mountain that is completely surrounded on all sides by other things, so it's finished off. Then you want sets of brocks, farms, and lighthouses. They're just buildings that appear on the tiles. So you're really just trying to collect those icons, and it means that the tiles with those on just become really valuable. This one is having the most barrels. The person will get 5 points. Barrels are on certain tiles, and they represent whiskey, and you are trying to connect those barrels up to your castle via road so that you will make money from them. Every round, at the start of the round, you get your income, and so the number of barrels you have will give you your income. So it can be good early on in the game to get those barrels, because then you've got more money, so then you've got more spending power to be able to get the better tiles. The other way to get points is on certain tiles you have these scrolls. This one's saying you get a point for every farm. So again, it's just an icon that you're looking for on the tiles, and the more of those you have, the more points you get. So it's very simple in the ways that you get points, just objectives and those scrolls. And you're just trying to worry about having those whiskey barrels to have money, and then really the crux of the game is in this bidding, how you set the prices, but then also the prices you're willing to pay for other people. And what I love about that is that it's interactive. You're always frustrated by people that buy all the tiles that you want, or people setting a price so high that you can't afford, or you're annoyed at yourself because you set a price too high and then therefore you had no money, or you set it too low and they got a really good thing for really cheap. It just gets you thinking, but in a really social, interesting way that makes for a fun game dynamic. Isle of Skye is different to any other game I played, so it's absolutely staying in my collection, and I would really recommend anyone try it at least once. I don't have strong flaws with the gameplay. I do find the theme to be a bit lackluster. The artwork's sort of okay, but it has a slightly odd look to it when you create your territory. It's not as satisfying as you might like. I just think this bidding thing, this mechanism, it could have been applied to almost anything. If this was maybe a city or something, just with a bit more character to it, it just seems all a bit dour. Maybe that's me because I'm from Britain and Scotland's not as exotic. But just collecting sheep and lighthouses and brocks, which are just these sort of stone buildings, I feel like there could be something a bit more interesting with what is a really cool, interesting game mechanism. So it just reminds me a bit too much of a style of Eurogame that was out sort of 10 or more years ago. And I feel like a lot of companies and publishers have passed that, and Isle of Skye still seems like it has one foot in the past a little bit. But a great game, that is Isle of Skye. Monster Match is a speed reaction game from Happy Planet Games, who make Happy Salmon and Funky Chicken, and all of their games come in these awesome pouches. This one, of course, looking like a monster. And this is a very simple game where you are rolling dice, and you've got a number, and then you've got a body part. So 3 eyes, could be legs or hands, and you are just having to put your finger on the monster that has 3 eyes. And sometimes there'll be more than one. You're trying to race against the other players. So if I put my finger here, nobody else can go there. But if, for example, we had 0 eyes, I put my finger here, well, someone else can go here and here and here, because there are multiple monsters in the game with 0 eyes. And actually, some have more points than others. So you're trying to collect donuts for some reason, and this card has 3 donuts in the corner, whereas this one only has 1. Generally speaking, you don't spot that whilst you're racing to get there. But yeah, you just put your finger on the card and you win that card if you're correct. If you're wrong, you have to give back a card that you've earned. Very, very simple, and yet just fun. If you like this kind of game, would be great with kids and families, or as a drinking game. I really like some of the cute monster art on it. But one of the things I like about it compared to other speed reaction games is just that you don't have to be the fastest. You can still get something. Maybe if you're second or third fastest. Generally, someone's going to miss out, but it means that it isn't always won by that one person that just always does better than everyone else. And I really like that. If it happens that there are no monsters that match the dice you rolled, then you just press in this middle here, and that is when you would draw up more cards, and so more monsters get placed out, and the game ends when you run out of the deck and you just count up how many donuts you have, and the person with the most donuts wins the game. So I would highly recommend this game if you're looking for a speed reaction game with adorable art, and great with kids or anyone that would get frustrated about not doing so well, because generally speaking, everyone does get a card every couple of rounds. It's not as brutal as something like Go Splits. There are definitely other speed reaction games I prefer, like Not So Fast or maybe even Rainbow Rage, but those ones are a bit more complex and definitely not as family and kid friendly, and maybe just not so immediate with the simple rules and great look of this one. So definitely recommend Monster Mash or Monster Match. Blue Moon City is a game from Reiner Knizia, and I've really been enjoying a lot of his older games lately, trying out all the kind of reprints of games that I never tried that are from 10 or more years ago, and this is one that I'd always heard good things about, and so I wanted to try it. It's a card game mostly, and you are trying to help build this city. The theme is pretty loose in the game, but I will explain a little bit about what you are supposed to be doing, which is that you are making contributions to help build these buildings, sort of restore them, and then they get flipped, and you are given for that a bunch of these crystals, and then to win the game you need to donate the crystals to the ultimate obelisk, which is in the center of the board usually, and you have to donate. So for example, 7 crystals, and you would get to place one of your tokens on the obelisk. And to win the game, you just need to get a certain number of your tokens on here before anyone else. So it's a race to the finish, really. And the way you're doing everything, really, is with these cards. So you've got a hand of cards, and you are trying to collect sets of colors to be able to contribute to these buildings. So this building here wants yellow cards. So you need to play some yellow cards that add up to the value of 4, and you would get to place one of your tokens on here. Once all these spots are filled on the building, it will be flipped. It's now been built, but the people involved in helping build it will get some benefits. So the person with the majority will get an extra benefit for themselves, then everyone involved will get a benefit, and then also you might get benefits from adjacent buildings. So if I'm building adjacent to this one, which has already been built, it's going to get 2 shards, and so there's a kind of spatial aspect to where you build next and how you plan things because of those benefits being next to other things. You also need to take into account these dragons. They will be being moved around by cards. So cards are either the color that you play them for to contribute to buildings, or they are the action at the top of the card. So this card here allows you to play it, instead of using it for its color, I'll play it to be able to move a dragon to any space. And so I'm going to want to move it to my space, so that if I contribute to this building whilst the dragon is watching, because apparently they like to see these things happening, I will be then given dragon scales for my hard work. And so if I can get 2 dragons there, I'll get 2 dragon scales. And dragon scales are just something that you are trying to collect. You want to have more of them than the other players, and you will then benefit by getting more of these crystals. As you'd expect from a Reiner Knizia game, very simple rules, but some depth of decision making, and it just flows really nicely. You can move up to 2 spaces on your turn, then you'll play as many cards as you want to contribute, and then you'll draw back up, and it's the next person's turn. For me, Blue Moon City is a good game, but not a great game. It feels a little bit pedestrian. It doesn't have the exciting moments of something like High Society or Hollywood Golden Age, or the confrontation and cutthroatness of Blue Lagoon. It's just fine. And fine these days just isn't quite there for me, especially when the theme's not that exciting either. Adding on top of that, a box that is a little bit too big, and it's not one that I'll be keeping. I can recommend it. I wouldn't necessarily never play it again. I don't think it's a bad game. I just think there are loads of better games. That is Blue Moon City. Corinth is a roll and write game from Days of Wonder, and that's why I was excited about it, because Days of Wonder don't release that many games, and they tend to have a really nice production with them. I like roll and write games, so there's that as well. And this one has really nice artwork on the box. It's very simple. On your turn, you will roll these white dice, all of these white dice, and then you will place them on this board. You will place the highest number at the top, and so in this case it's 6, so you'd place all of the 6s. And then you would start from the bottom and you just go in numerical order. So we've got 2 1s, 3 3s, 2 4s, and a 5. That's what's available to the players, and then you take it in turns to draft one of these numbers. And what we're looking at is the icon. So you've got a bunch of different things that you're trying to collect. at the top you've got gold, and so you often will just be trying to get lots of gold, and you'll be keeping track of how much gold you have by circling it. And then at the bottom you've got goats, which work in a similar way. They're both sort of a currency, and you will be circling those. These other ones represent different shops, and you will just be crossing off a number of wares in those shops depending on how many dice. So if I take 3 dice here in this green one, then I could circle 3 pots here in this one, and now I've got myself 3 points because I've completed a section there. So that's me done, then it's on to the next person. It's only a 4-player game, so you just take it in turns. So maybe they take the goats, they circle, they've now got 2 extra goats. So as you see in the last 2 rounds, this gold region hasn't been reached because of the way the dice have rolled. And so that you're going to score more points for this region if you're able to get to those shops, but it's just a lot less likely. So you would probably take advantage of it if you could, if it did happen. What I have found is that often you will just go for the place with the most dice. It doesn't feel like always there's much kind of strategy in terms of what you were planning to do, because, okay, the game decided that now I've got the option to cross off 4 things in purple. Doesn't really matter if I ever went to purple before. I'm crossing 4 things off in purple because that's worth 6 points to me right now. And so it doesn't feel like there's as much planning as you might get with other roll and write games. The other crucial thing about the game is that you've got this track here of this person that is walking around. And so instead of crossing off a shop here or taking the goats or the gold, you can just take a die and then move this guy in the corner along his track. And so I take this dice and I can move the person 3 spaces. When he ends up, I would circle that, and that gives me something else. So there's a little bit of chaining stuff because I could move him 1, 2, 3, now cross off a purple pot, which is allowing me in the purple region. So you're kind of using it to benefit somewhere else. If you get to one of these corner spots, you will get points for every circle you've crossed. So if you really focus on this track here, that's probably gonna benefit you. It also can unlock these gold dice. And so on your turn, you'll get to roll extra dice, but you can also pay for those. So if you've got lots of gold, you can cross off a gold for every extra dice you want to roll on your turn. You'd roll them with everything else. They get placed out, and they are just going to make it more likely that on your turn, you're going to get more resources or get more stuff. They only count for you. So once you've taken your pick, all the gold dice are taken off the board, and the next person doesn't get to choose from them. The other thing that you can do is you can use gold and goats to buy these different powers at the bottom. So this one here would get you 2 more gold every time you take gold. So it just means that's way more efficient. There's definitely decisions in Corinth in terms of which things you should focus on, but it doesn't really feel any more exciting or interesting than a load of other roll and write games I've played. I tend to find the dice drafting slows it down, but doesn't really make it that much more of an interesting game. I've found that you will just often just put any strategy out the window and just take where the biggest dice is, and that just works quite well. And so there's sort of not that much decision making. Sometimes you just go with what the dice are giving you. It feels a little bit good kind of having the buildings which then make you better at doing other things. But the game is quite short, and so you don't necessarily have those powers for very long. Overall, it just doesn't have that kind of push your luck or excitement that some roll and write games have. And it doesn't have the depth of something like Welcome To or the awesome like comboing of Genshin Clever. It's just sort of somewhere in the middle, and yeah, just didn't really hit the spot for me. That is Corinth. Stone Age is a worker placement game from 10 years ago, and this is the new anniversary edition. I'd never played this one before, so I wanted to have a chance to try it and see what the fuss was all about. You are sending out your Stone Age workers to different spots. It has this interesting dice mechanism where if I send 2 people to get some wood, I roll 2 dice in this cup that comes with the game, and I got a 9, and then I divide that by the number that is on my board here for wood. Wood is 3, so I end up getting 3 wood. So some things are easier to forage for than others. Wood is one of the cheaper ones. And if I was to send only 2 people to go and get gold, well, I'd need to get at least a 6, and I only rolled a 2, so then I don't get any gold. And so there's this interesting gambling aspect to it that I just really like. It's really immediate. It's kind of about hedging your bets, knowing when you really need to get something, so you send a lot of people, or knowing when you actually should probably just kind of spread them out a bit more thinly and take a bit of a gamble on stuff. The anniversary edition actually is double-sided, so we're playing on the snowy side of the board, and it's the same with these tiles. So the other side is what they used to look like in the original game, and you can just play in the winter instead. So these huts are ways to get points, and you will be just trying to get the resources to be able to build them. So another big aspect of the game is at the end of each round, you've got to feed your tribe. So for every worker that you have, you need to spend some food. Food comes generally from hunting. And so again, you can send people there, roll dice, you'll get a bunch of food, and then you need to feed your people each round. So it's something you've always got to worry about. It doesn't ever get you points, but if you don't do it, then you will lose resources and potentially lose points if you don't have resources. You can also get more workers. The way you do that is by sending 2 of your workers to the hut where they basically go and have sex. And then at the end of the round, you'll get another worker. And so your tribe continues to grow. But of course, if it gets too big, then you've got a lot of food that you're going to need. So you want to balance that. The other thing you can do is to get these tools, which you can basically spend to up your dice results. So these can be good to help mitigate the luck of the dice a little bit, but also just mean that every time you roll the dice, your people are a bit stronger. It just works. There's no wonder that it's coming out with the 10th anniversary edition and that it's been fated for so long as kind of a gateway worker placement game. It's not a short game necessarily. I wouldn't say it's super long. It's maybe, I wouldn't use it to introduce complete non-gamers to board games. It's a little bit too complicated for that, but I think it's a good next step after kind of like a Ticket to Ride. And there are definitely different ways to kind of get points. There's a set collection thing that is shown on your board where you can try and collect the cards with certain symbols on and get points that way. Not very thematic, but it makes the game interesting. And then it's about trying to get these points multipliers depending on, so this one is going to get points for how many people in your tribe. So you get a bunch of these cards, you're going to score loads of points for how many members of your tribe at the end of the game. So there is a survival aspect and that kind of building up, but really it does come down to a kind of very classic point scoring. I've got a lot of respect for Stone Age. I think it's a really well-designed game that is almost the perfect introduction to worker placement games. I think it's going to stick around in my collection because I've got a lot of gateway games that are more attractive and more exciting in their gameplay that I would prefer to introduce people to board games to. And then if I was going to play a worker placement game, I would want to play something with a bit more theme like Pursuit of Happiness, or just with maybe more interesting mechanisms like Champions of Midgard, or something a bit deeper like Brewcrafters. So those are some of the worker placement games that I really like. And this one is somehow sort of in the middle there, with some artwork that feels a bit dated and gameplay that, whilst is interesting, it just maybe doesn't have that sort of X factor that you might be looking for in a modern game when there is just so many games out there to impress us. So for me, it's sort of like a solid 7 out of 10. So if you like the theme of it, or if you want a worker placement game that's a great introduction to the genre, then check out Stone Age. Those are the board games I've been playing lately. I've put links to where you can buy them in the description below. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel to see more like it. I'm Jon Purkis. Thanks for watching.